All right, Buffalo Bills draft recap. Clearly, they wanted to make an effort to improve their defense, not selecting an offensive player until pick 173. And I think it made sense, despite some pretty impressive, or at least solid defensive metrics last year. As a whole, I just think they needed more talent there, and you saw it against the best teams last year, like the Rams, and obviously like the Chiefs in the conference championship game. They want to be able to defend Kansas City, I think is a big part of what they're trying to do here, and I think they did a pretty good job at doing what they were trying to do. So let's get into it. The chart you see next to me, the first number you're going to see is where the player was selected, then you see the player name, the player position, and finally where that player was projected to go via the consensus big board. Always fun to compare those two things. But Maxwell Harrison, projected to go right around early 30s, goes pick 30, who is a player who should just be a really good corner, has potential to be this outside corner guy. Now, I will say he is a bit of a developmental guy, but at corner, that's totally fine. You want developmental guys usually, as opposed to production guys who don't have traits for corner, just because it is such a leap going to NFL talent that sometimes guys are good corners in college but just can't make it work at the NFL level. It varies position for position of, do you want the talent or do you want the tape? And he has good tape too. He has some really good plays. Just some bit of inconsistencies there, but ultimately if he can put it all together, which there's a very good chance he can, then you could have a great cornerback duo of him and Benford. So that's got to be exciting if you're a Bills fan. They also decided to go with an interior defensive lineman. They could certainly use another guy, another body in that area, right? TJ Sanders, a player who, I don't know if you're looking at him as a potential superstar, was projected to go almost 20 picks later than he did go, which you never love to be on that side of things. But ultimately, he is someone who should be, he's interesting. So he did actually start, get more and more snaps these past couple years. He had nearly 500 snaps each of the past 2 years. I do think he is probably a 300 snap a year player, bit lighter at 290, but moves very well. So, 290 isn't that light, right? Aaron Donald was 280, although that's a very unique scenario. But 290 definitely a little bit on the light side, but still plays well and kind of uses his quickness a lot of times to win. So should be a pretty good interior guy. Maybe not a star, but someone who can help out. Next up, they ended with just a couple of big-bodied players. So first, the edge rusher Landon Jackson, who's listed at 6'7", 280 as an edge rusher. I think the concern you might have is, what exactly do you do with that? Where do you find a fit? I just said Aaron Donald is 280, but usually there's not a lot of guys who are 280 in the NFL. Usually you want to be 20 pounds heavier and play inside, or be 20 pounds lighter and play, edge. That being said, we just saw Shamar Stewart get drafted in the first round, who honestly you could say is a comparable prospect to someone like Landon Jackson. I'm not saying they're one-for-one comparison, but getting someone like Landon Jackson pick 72, I'm never against getting developmental guys once you get further down the board and seeing if you can work something out, get him better. And he did have very good run defense metrics last year, which, again, I'd hope so given his size, but still. They then went out and got Deon Walker out of Kentucky, who is a player that, his measurables will jump out at you. He's listed at 345, 6'6" as an interior guy. So, okay, this is a big-bodied guy, even when you compare him to the other big-bodied guys, right? He doesn't quite have the production that you might hope for someone like that. So again, especially in run defense, which is kind of surprising because you think that's where he would thrive. So I think there is a bit of coaching that you want to do here, but ultimately the logic is, I guess you can get someone to weigh more if you really want to, but there's only so much you can do about size, but there's a lot you can do about technique, and I think their logic here is, let's get a couple of these, big guys who hopefully can play physical, and we can coach them up. Their next two picks, I would say, are both guys that you're looking at to be potential, role players, depth pieces. We're in the 170s now, so you're probably not getting stars. But for example, Jordan Hancock, slot corner. A lot of people feel like he isn't the athlete to be able to do much more than that. But ultimately, I don't mind these types of picks. Jackson Howie's, I'm not sure how you say that last name, but I know how you say the first name. But he is someone who's really just going to be a blocking tight end. That's kind of his role. And it's okay, these two positions aren't the most valuable positions, but ultimately, if you can get guys who can be contributors at pick 170 and 173, well, there's still a lot of value in something like that. So I don't hate necessarily going this route. At pick 177, they went Dorian Strong here, who I'm assuming they just like more as a player. He was projected to go 122nd. They get him at 177, so that's pretty good. Ultimately, not the measurables that you're going to fall in love with, let's just say that. Not a huge corner and not a very explosive corner. He did run a 4.45 at his pro day. Pro day times can sometimes be a little bit, a little bit misleading. Sometimes they're actually a little bit slower, but that's not horrible for a corner. You kind of right around that cutoff that you want to be on, but also not a huge guy either. Did play well in college though, and this is kind of the opposite of Maxwell Hairston. And I just kind of said, hey, usually you want the Maxwell Hairston type as opposed to the Strong type. Well, okay, listen, these guys are going 140 picks apart. Getting someone this late in the draft at this spot isn't the worst thing in the world. Then I went with Chase Lunt, who is he's 24 years old, so an older prospect, but he's also 6'8". However, many people felt like his biggest issue was strength, and sometimes that happens, like Evan Neal, right, where you're just almost too tall for the position. I will say, again, you look at some certain metrics, specifically his run blocking metrics, were very good. And so I wonder if you can try and figure out a way to, again, he'll start as a depth guy, but I do wonder if you can try and maybe find a way to get him into the lineup at some point with some of the skill sets and the fact that he was a good run blocker in college. There might be a way to use him, but you got to figure it out, which is why he fell to pick 206. Finally, we have Caden Prather here, who essentially the argument for him is people felt as though maybe he wasn't fully utilized in the Maryland offense. And now that you get him in, potentially an offense that could figure something out, I do think that anytime you see a wide receiver go at pick 240, where does your mind go? Oh, probably a special teams guy, right? And I'm not saying that that's not like a 6'3" receiver. You could definitely find a spot on special teams. He'll probably need to play special teams, just being a guy who went 240 just to make sure he makes the roster. But I don't know if they're drafting him only with special teams in mind. I think there maybe is some hope they can figure out a way to get him in the lineup as well, but definitely, he's got to make sure he practices special teams this offseason, I would assume. I have not done a deep dive on him, but that's what I would assume. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on the Bills draft. A very interesting draft. I do think they got better defensively. Will this be the year they finally break through? I think there's a better chance this year than last year. I'll say that. So, yeah, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And, of course, as always, thanks for watching. I feel like I should clarify. When I said better chance this year than last year, I meant heading into this year, I feel better than I did heading into last year, even though I still felt pretty good about them heading into last year. I think you got what I meant. Whatever. Goodbye.